We did it, boys. We finally got our playset of Pot of Prosperity. Now it's time to put them in. I think I just wasted $300. What's going on with you guys? TheCaliEffect, king of games here. And today we're going to be talking about why Pot of Prosperity is not a good Yu-Gi-Oh card. It feels really weird talking about how pot's just not good for you. It has amazing medical applications. It's a great stress reliever. Wait, hold on. The Yu-Gi-Oh card. Now, while admittedly Pot of Prosperity isn't as bad as the title suggests, in this video I'm going to be giving you a reason why Pot of Prosperity is not as good as some players believe to be. So of course, if you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to destroy that subscribe button, but also post down below in the comment section, what are your thoughts on Pot of Prosperity and what price do you think it will settle at? So with all that out of the way, let's actually just start talking about the card because I mean, that's what you're here for, right? Pot of Prosperity is a normal spell card that makes its debut in the Blazing Vortex set, a set that isn't well received by Yu-Gi-Oh players in total because of its lack of competitive relevancy, but that's also one of the reasons why Pot of Prosperity is such an expensive card, because it's one of the few cards that are competitive inside of the set. Its effect reads, banish 3 to 6 cards of your choice from the extra deck face down. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, any damage your opponent takes is halved. Also, excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of cards banished, add 1 excavated card to your hand, place the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only activate 1 Pot of Prosperity once per turn. You cannot draw cards by card effects the turn you activate this card. Now, for the players that have been keeping up with their Yu-Gi-Oh, Pot of Prosperity is a blend between Pot of Extravagance and Pot of Duality, allowing you to excavate cards from the top of your deck, but does require you to banish cards from your extra deck. A really cool thing about Pot of Prosperity that it has over Pot of Extravagance is that you can actually choose the cards that you banish face down as opposed to being random, and a cool thing that it has over Duality is that you can still special summon monsters to your side of the field, and you have an opportunity to excavate more cards, allowing you to dig deeper into your deck so you can potentially see the card that you need to add to your hand. Now, I hate math just as much as Yu-Gi-Oh players hate to read card effects, but we have to do some math about Pot of Prosperity to be able to detail on how strong this card is. Fortunately for us, my man's Neos actually laid out some math about Pot of Prosperity and how it can hit certain cards. We know if you play 3 copies of a particular card inside of your main board, you have a 34% chance of opening that card. Coincidentally, if you play 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity, as well as 3 copies of that card, you have a 44% chance of opening the card or opening Pot of Prosperity to be able to excavate the card to add to your hand, assuming you excavate 6. But that's not necessarily the entire story. Yu-Gi-Oh players have found multiple ways to search into a particular card, essentially playing more copies of a certain action that they're trying to do, and that's where the serious math starts to work. If you play 10 copies of a particular card or ways to search into that particular card, then the percentage of you actually opening Pot of Prosperity to excavated or the particular card is about 86%. You can get an additional 5% by playing 2 more cards at 12, but is it really worth it? 86% is like, I mean, you're pretty much there. And playing over 12 copies of a particular card, you're actually going against your numbers. You don't increase as much as you would hope by playing more cards. You're just going to see more starters or more prosperity into your starters. Now, of course, all of that was done in a 5-card hand in a 40-card deck. We have so many other variables that could be factored in, and I'll actually be able to give you a sheet that you can download if you wanted to check the numbers yourself. Now that I'm done to you explaining about Pot of Prosperity as a Yu-Gi-Oh card, I can tell you the good and the bad about this particular card, because while Pot of Prosperity isn't a terrible Yu-Gi-Oh card, it's not as good as players think. Let's jump into the good though to talk about how amazing this card can be. Now, the restriction that your opponent takes half damage for the rest of the turn could be negligible if you are either going first, or you can put double the damage on the board. Come on, forehead. Just put 16,000 damage on the field. That's easy. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do it. You Yu-Gi-Oh millennials don't know how good you have it. Back in my day, we had to put 11,000 damage on the board consistently because the upstart goblin, it only gave us 1 random card. Yu-Gi millennials. Taking out a small loan of 16,000 damage should be easy for you Yu-Gi-Oh millennials. All you have to do is just Venmo request your dad for 8,000 more damage. It's that simple now. a small loan of 8,000 more damage. I'm having too much fun with this. Now, the extra deck banishment for Pot of Prosperity is also negligible if you play a deck that doesn't need its extra deck, play a deck that has very few resources needed inside of the extra deck, or you win fast enough. Also, back in my day, we won within turn 1. It was called an FTK. Yeah, those were World War II days. Now, Pot of Prosperity is obviously a card designed to speed up the pace of the game by allowing you to dig deeper into your deck to grab those important cards that you need. But there are some serious drawbacks to this card that you should strongly consider when you're playing it in particular decks. The devalue of the extra deck is an interesting situation. Players have always argued in favor of giving up just about anything just to get deeper or dig deeper into the particular cards. Upstart Goblin, Pot of Desires, and Pot of Duality is living proof that players are willing to give up just about anything just to get into that critical card that they need in order for them to play Yu-Gi-Oh! They'll even build their strategy around compensating for these particular cards, anything just to get closer to their goal. I mean, hell, if there was a card that said pay half of your life points to draw 2 cards, this would probably be considered one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards of all time. It'd be a staple mandatory 3 of no matter what deck that you played, and every deck would have to have it. Is that how boy crazy you guys are to having cards to your hand? Back in my day, we had the good old cards, Reinforcement of the Army, Sengan. We lived on those type of times. The crazy thing is that these concepts are actually extremely understandable. Giving up 10 cards from your main deck, preventing you from special summoning for a duration of the turn, giving your opponent life points, all of these are almost no-brainer type of costs that you would pay in order to get closer to your goal. But what about giving up your extra deck? The extra deck has been a game-changing, transformative piece in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. Now, I want my Yu-Gi boomers and players alike to think back before the extra deck was a utility piece. And when I mean think back, I mean think way back. I mean, you was probably in the DARE program when this was a thing. And they told us not to do pot. Why are we here? Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a lot more simple, but it also was a lot more luck-based. You would need to draw a particular out to the problematic threat that your opponent have, instead of just picking up your extra deck and then utilizing cards to be able to out your opponent's card. This is the reason why cards like Reinforcement of the Army was just so powerful, because it allows you to search cards like Exile Force and Mystic Swordsman level 2, cards that allowed you to easily out problematic threats that your opponent would summon. Now, the concept of this has been completely obliterated by the extra deck, with cards like Holt Savage Dragon and Nightmare Unicorn being cards to be able to out your opponent's cards or even prevent your opponent from using cards at the drop of the dime. Back in my day, it was cards like Smashing Ground and Solemn Judgment that were the go-to cards to get over your opponent's threats. Now, instead of having to hope to hard draw them, you have them in your extra deck. No wonder why nobody plays Smashing Ground anymore. Just get it from your extra deck. But that's actually the problem that lies within Pot of Prosperity. Your extra deck is your utility tool. It's actually the thing that keeps you from running archaic cards like Smashing Ground and mainboarding Solemn Judgment in every single deck, is the thing that actually allows you to progressively move forward in 2021. And if we can check the stats, just about every topping deck in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta currently all use their extra deck. And while you still can play an extra deck, Pot of Prosperity limits your options and forces you to play multiples of a card, which actually limits your utility toolbox. This can put you back into archaic times if you're not proper with your deck building, like Smashing Ground archaic times. Smashing? Now, is there anything really wrong with that? No, not if you're a nostalgic player, to be honest. Like I said, Pot of Prosperity speeds the game up, but it does it for decks that can't utilize their extra deck or don't utilize their full ability of their extra deck. It's an intricate deck building card like Pot of Extravagance that allows some of those older decks to keep up with some of the naturally competitive decks that can use their extra deck, while also limiting those top tier decks from being able to search their important cards and OTK you, because 16,000 damage is kinda hard to do. These particular strategies do need a specific card. Pot of Prosperity actually allows you to dig deeper to get that card. Now, if I'm speaking on the behalf of budget, nostalgic, and players that actually understand the context of this video, Pot of Prosperity is actually a well-balanced Yu-Gi-Oh card by Konami. This card is nowhere near a must-play Yu-Gi-Oh card in every single deck like some players believe, but the card does open up so many avenues for competitive players to use other strategies that couldn't naturally compete with decks that abuse the extra deck, and the nostalgic players can relive the good old days where a Yu-Gi-Oh card is way too expensive and can complain how the card is actually needed. The Upper Deck days, guys. I know y'all remember that. Those were the good old days, right? I loved as a teenager trying to figure out how to get in a $1,000 Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Yeah, that was fun. I'm just playing. But seriously, this card is a huge win for some of those nostalgic decks that haven't adapted too well to the extra deck, but actually have some really good components inside of their main board to be able to stop some of the top contending decks. Well, that is all that I have for Pot of Prosperity being a bad Yu-Gi-Oh card. Again, I want you to voice down below in the comment section, what exactly do you think about Pot of Prosperity? Is it a mandatory 3-of inside of every competitive Yu-Gi-Oh deck? Am I wrong, or do you agree with what I have to say? As always, be sure to check out these videos, as I'll catch you on the next one.